Chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita, Karma Yoga, the path of action, how one has to act in the world. So, as we have been discussing, he talked about the three grades of action, right? Tamasic is that lowest state where you don't want to act and you want something for nothing. It's the worst thing. That's what he says. He who eats without producing is a thief. You keep taking, and not contributing, not inclined to repay, to work. Not repay, at least do what you deserve, right? You need to work. That's how the world functions. You work, you act, and that's how you should always have the attitude, let me work for what I get. And the Rajasic are willing to work. So that's why they are higher than the Tamasic. They're willing to put in effort. But since it is purely selfish, that's where they go wrong. So that's what he says. You cook for your own sake. You eat sin. Sin means mental agitation. So you live a desire-ridden life and you just create more desires. Not only are you agitated now, you get more and more disturbed as you go through life. That's why most people look back at their life for happiness. Oh, when I was a kid, it was so nice, no worries, anxiety. Why do you say that? Because you've developed the wrong attitude. It's just me and mine. So the Sattvic, he says, work for a higher purpose. They put in hard work, but not for themselves. They eat the remnants of sacrifice, he puts it beautifully. So their attitude is not to get something. Whatever comes out of their action, they're satisfied. So they are peaceful and happy. That is the secret. And then in 14 and 15, he talked about the principle of sacrifice, yajna, and gave that sort of a roundabout metaphor, agricultural metaphor, how from the principle of sacrifice you have come from Brahman, the reality, to this individuality. So to get back, you have to follow the same principle. In other words, the entire Vedanta, in fact, the entire spiritual development is built on sacrificing this ego and egocentric desires. You've got to give it up. And if you can give that up, you gain the infinite supreme bliss of the self. That's the finality. That's the goal and purpose of life. That's why he said in the 15th verse, Tasmat, therefore, the all-pervading Brahman always rests in sacrifice. So I told you, right from the ancient Vedic times, the main ritual was the fire, the sacrifice, where you're giving up and the fire flares up. In other words, you give up your ignorance and the spiritual growth happens. That's the symbolism. The fire represents knowledge and the giving up represents this ego. That's it. So you don't follow this wheel of motion, he says, pravartitam chakram. This wheel where you've descended from the infinite to the finite, now you have to ascend back to the infinite. This is the wheel of life. If you don't follow it, means you just enamored of the world, the sense contacts, and you live in vain, he says. O Partha. In fact, as you go through life, it's diminishing returns. The same sense contacts give less and less pleasure, but the desires remain. It's horrible. That's why everybody is agitated, disturbed. There's a monotony, a boredom. And you look for stupid things to relieve it. Some variety, it doesn't work. It's insatiable. So he says, you live in vain, O Partha. So Kabira says that, Beet gaye din bhajana binare. So in the sense, your days have gone without thinking of the Supreme, following this wheel. Bal avastha khel gavayo, yab yoban tab man ghanare. So when you were a kid, your whole time was wasted in playing, khel. And then when you are a youth, too much ego, man ghanare, too much arrogance of youth. I know what I am doing. I know what I want in life. You can't tell a youngster anything. At that age, you also did. I also did. Everybody believes. I know. This degree, this partner, this child, this job. I know what I'm doing. Shut up. Don't come against me. Man ghanare, he says. Lahe karan mool gavayo. Because of that desire. Laha means the desire. Most of your life is dissipated. Arjuna gai man ki trishnare, he says. But still all the desires are there. Nothing has gone. So what have you achieved? Kahat Kabir suno bhai sadhyo. So he says, amongst all of you, those who are interested, the sadhaks, listen. Par utar gaye sant janare. Follow only those great ones who have crossed this samsara. Which is Vedanta. Vedanta is composed by those who have crossed over and liberated themselves. Otherwise, a waste. That's what he says. So you live your whole life and back to square one. Same desires, same attachments. First it was parent, now it's children. Same thing in a different way. Then it will go to grandchildren. It's incredible. So you live in vain, not understanding what is your mission. The reason you're born is to get back to the self. Nothing else. So that's where we were last time. Verse 16. So these are very hard-hitting verses which talk about what your mission is in life. You got to act to fulfill that mission. That's what the rest of the chapter will explain to us, how to do so. So before we begin, any questions? Yes, Vikram.
Gautamji, there is a question on chat asking how following karma yoga reduces the bulk of your desires.
How? The principle of removing desires is when your thoughts are on the higher, you don't feed the lower desires. That's the principle of spiritual evolution. Now, desires are maintained, sustained by thought force. Thinking is the food that feeds desire, right? So if you can cut off the food supply, it'll die. And the only way you can stop thinking of something is to think of something better. Otherwise, you can't. A child can't stop thinking of toys. But the minute the child becomes an adult, its thought go to the adult world, which is far superior. So obviously it won't go to toys. None of you think of toys, which you were obsessed with when you were a kid. So with Vedanta, you get knowledge of the self, which is far higher than all your playthings in this world, all these toys that make your joys. So keep getting the knowledge. It'll go. There's no other way. You had something? Yeah.
So my question is regarding to wheel of sacrifice. So we talked about from Supreme Self become individual and individual going back to Supreme Self. So it seems like it's a cycle. So that means like you going back and then come back individual. But I think it was a permanent state as
Right.
we talked about. So okay.
No. Everybody has this question. From the Supreme State, I came here. If I go back, won't I come back again? It's not like that. So he's trying to explain the principle of how you get back. But when you get back, it's permanent. See, when you elevate yourself, you don't come back. I've told you, right? When you become cultured, you don't become uncultured. When you become literate, you don't become illiterate again. It's a higher state which you're established in. So those who realize the self have declared that it's the finality. That's why it's called, the subject is called Vedanta. It's the culmination. Veda, wisdom, Anta, the end. It ends there. That's it. Yadgatvan anivartante. Constantly they say it's a permanent state. So those who've reached there have declared that. How can you? So from our level also we understand. When you're illiterate, you learn how to read and write, you don't lose it. It's a permanent growth, right? So don't worry. You first get there. Yes.
Gautamaji, this concept of wheel, does that have anything to do with what we know as Ashoka Chakra?
Wheel, the Ashoka Chakra. See, that is also the same principle, that the consciousness is in the center and all the conditioned consciousness are going out. But it's not this wheel of life. It is symbolic of the spoke, which is the pure consciousness, and all the hub, and the spokes are the conditioned consciousness that arise out of that pure consciousness. So you're conscious. One spoke is conscious of sight. One spoke is conscious of sound, conscious of taste, then conscious of love, hatred, thought, desire. Everything is a spoke. The hub is the consciousness, the divinity, the self. That's what it symbolizes. Anything else? Yeah.
Gautam, do you have a pre-submitted question?
Pre-submitted. Yes. Go ahead. And that was related to this, so we took it here. Correct.
Question from Vikram. Swamiji teaches us never to take anything for free and has demonstrated it in his talks how he refused to take discounts and insisted on paying full price. We get this knowledge of Vedanta from you for free. You tell us that this knowledge should not be charged. By taking this knowledge for free, are we not contradicting what Swamiji taught about not taking anything for free?
See, first of all, that first line is misquoted. Swamiji refused to take discount and insists on paying not full price, more than full price. So don't misquote him, whoever Vikram. So, see, the point he was making about tamasic attitude is you don't want to pay. You want nothing to do with money. You want to take something without putting in the effort for it. Now, that is totally different than what you're talking about here. Here, I have explained to you all in certain contexts, the tradition has always been that this knowledge is given for the benefit of humanity. It's one-sided. And those who want to support, those days it was the kings who made sure, in the good old days, that the gurukulas, the ashrams were well supported so anybody could come and learn. So nowadays in the modern context, it's through the foundations or whatever people donate if you feel it worthwhile to support the cause. So we, through our foundation, we support the work here. We support even the academy in India. Some of you have been coming for a while now. So that is totally up to you. So you should have the attitude that you want to repay if you feel that it's useful for you. So that's totally up to you. So we don't create any conditions. Charging for this knowledge is out of the question. So it's purely up to you. So it's your attitude which matters. So that is, so if you're being given something which you find useful, well, that doesn't mean you shouldn't take it. But your attitude should not be not to have that gratitude and repayment. So whoever wants to do in their own way, we leave that up to you. Because we know if the cause is worth it, support will come. So I came to this country, my guru said, go. I said, go means, what do you mean go? And you will be amazed how, if you have the right attitude, by itself, people will find that this is something worthwhile. That's all. So it's your attitude which matters. So extremely difficult. People have told me, you come here and you get into the way things are here, tickets and all. Imagine every class. It'd be a mockery of the whole thing. So, all clear? 17.
Yastvatmaratireva syat atmatriptascha manavaha atmanyeva cha santushtah tasya karyam na vidyate.
But the man who rejoices in the self, Atmarati, Atmatripta, satisfied in the self, Atma Santushtaha, content in the self, for him there is nothing to be done. Now again, these are the verses which create a lot of confusion, because on the outside he is equating perfection to a state where that person doesn't need to do anything. So especially in India, this has been misunderstood as perfection is inaction, giving up. So it has created a very wrong misconception. Misconception means wrong. I'm saying wrong misconception to emphasize. And people stopped acting, which is a problem continuing till today. There's a general tendency towards inaction. That's not what he's saying. Krishna throughout the text is telling Arjuna to act, to fight, to move, to function. So how can it be that? So till you reach perfection, you have to act, right? You have to even act to reach perfection. That we've understood. Now what he's saying here, once you have attained enlightenment, see, you must understand philosophically what is the reason for action. What is the reason? Incompleteness, unfulfillment. Because you are unhappy, you have to act to achieve happiness. It's as simple as that. And because your real nature is infinite, only when you achieve infinite will you stop. Till then you have to go on. See what is happening in the world. I've told you. You should learn from that, not from this. Consolidate it. What is the richest person in the world doing? For more rich, for more power. What is the most powerful person? More power. More money, more power, more control. Incredible. Anything, it goes on. Then they want more youth. All kinds of treatment going on. It is insatiable. So only a person, that's what he says, Atma Rati, who rejoices in the self. He's using 3 words to talk about the 3 levels: physical, mental, intellectual. At all 3 levels where you seek satisfaction, he's fully satisfied because he's hit the infinite. For such a person, he doesn't need to do anything for himself, for his own happiness, because he's achieved it. Now just see how something so simple has been complicated. So a realized soul functions in the world, is actionless with reference to his own desires. There's no desire, there's no action. So they function merely for the environment, to serve others. Now those days it was understood that's what it means. When they say they don't act, obviously for oneself. And people misunderstood it. See, if you want to achieve perfection, stop acting. Literally, they stop acting. So the most dynamic, progressive country became deteriorated to an extent where there's no action at all. Very, very sad. So remember, the more spiritual you become, the more you find satisfaction within. And the more you find satisfaction within, obviously there's less need to act in the world for yourself. The whole focus shifts on acting for others. In fact, that's how you find true satisfaction within, is when your focus is on service. You don't need anything. Just service satisfies you. Work is worship, right? Now what else you want? That's what he talks about yajna. So for him, there's nothing to be done. In fact, later in the Gita, I think in this chapter, if I'm not mistaken, he says that. In fact, now he'll say it. I don't need to act at all. I'm just acting for the sake of others. Krishna tells Arjuna. Because Arjuna didn't want to act. So he says, I don't need to act. I'm still acting. Because there's nothing in these 3 worlds that can give me anything. Krishna tells him. So you got to look for these things where they actually declare what they are. Otherwise, they don't talk about it. And he says, I don't need to act and I'm acting. You need to act and you're not acting. Now look at the disparity. So you got to understand it in this way. Otherwise, serious misconceptions. You got it? Yeah.
So in this commentary, it says an enlightened person has no obligatory duties in the world because he has no more desires to fulfill. So it looks like you said that there is obligation always to serve. Why does it say no obligatory duties?
It says in the commentary there's no obligations for an enlightened soul, right? Obligations refers to when you have a higher goal, whatever helps you achieve that goal becomes your obligatory duty. See, their obligatory duty is not your obligatory duty. My children. Then of course grandchildren also know obligation. What to do? There's a world of difference. Your obligation and what obligation. So obligation means you have a higher purpose. Anything to achieve that becomes your obligation. Which could include serving your family. I'm not saying no, because that will help you grow if you do it selflessly. So you have a goal when there's something to achieve. He's achieved it. What obligation? He has no obligation. So you can't understand how they function. It's not how you function. So the only way we understand, in fact, he says it in the Gita in another place. I think the 10th chapter, Tesham evanukam partham. Out of mere compassion, I function in this world. So that's the only way we understand. It's like a person who's totally immune from tuberculosis, let's say, and everybody in the world is a pandemic of tuberculosis, and he's immune and he has the cure. He doesn't need to do it. Nobody is in a condition to pay. But why would he give them the cure? Why? You just say mere compassion. You can't find any other reason. There's no obligation to do it. There's no reason to do it. But so he says, out of mere compassion, I function. So obligation is to be understood very specifically. That is actually the definition of obligation. Number one, it should be a higher goal. Two, whatever action takes you to that goal becomes your obligation. Everything else should be discarded. That's why it says in the 17th chapter, you remember when we did it, all action should be renounced except yajna, dana, tapa, except sacrifice, charity, and self-control. Everything else should be renounced. Those are your obligatory duties, these three. So she thought maybe we can trip him here somewhere. It's not that. There's nothing to achieve, so there's no obligation. It's as simple as that. And in the 18th verse, he continues. In fact, let's read the 18th. I'll explain it further. Then we can take up questions, because he's explaining the same thing.
नैव तस्य कृतेनार्थः नाकृतेनेह कश्चन न चास्य सर्वभूतेषु कश्चिदर्थव्यपाश्रयः.
For him, there is no interest whatever here is in what is done or not done, nor does he depend on any being for any object. Now, the second part is what you need to understand the first part. Otherwise, you misunderstand, as everybody does. See, a person will read this and say, this is Vedanta, forget it. No interest in what should be done, not done. What kind of life is this? Because you don't depend upon any being. Again, since you derive supreme happiness within, you don't need anything. In that sense, there's no interest. It's not that you don't care. Suppose your spouse, you will say in the morning before you go to work, have a good day, my dear, shut up. Right? You got that, no? Sometime, right? Many times. Then whole day what happens? I was so nice. I made an effort to say, have a good day, darling. And what did I get? Shut up. Oh my God. And then whole day something is happening. Why are you dependent on another person's mood? She says, shut up, just shut up. Good, no. You don't have to deal with it. What is the problem? Fantastic. Thank you very much. You sure I can shut up? Oh, yes. Okay. Don't say that. Inside it should be. Now, why are you dependent upon another person's mind or mood for your internal satisfaction? That's what all of you should ask yourself whenever you're agitated. Oh, my son hasn't called me, it's been 10 days. See, he's self-sufficient in terms of not calling you. The happier he is, the less he calls you. Only when bank balance goes low, he calls you. That also you don't understand. At least he called me. For what? That they won't trust it. So, why are you dependent on another person? So, all of us are dependent. That is why there is a constant anxiety. Interest here means that artha. Artha means that anxiety. What is happening? Why are they not doing this? So once you're spiritually self-sufficient, is that anxiety is not there. So better word than interest, because you won't understand interest. You will start saying, what is the interest rate? Like only that interest you remember. What is your interest? 7%, sorry. One fellow, he's not here, we can talk. So we went last year to see Swamiji. All of us, the January retreat. So 20 of us sitting there. And the minute Swamiji hears you're from America, his temperature goes up. Not really. Why you left India and went? For what? He won't ask you, Christina. No. You left America and came to India. So you're okay. Why did you go to America? So what was your interest? What was your interest? So, somebody will say, Swamiji, I went for the education. Don't talk rubbish, man. You just went for money. Right? Yes. We sensibly say yes and keep quiet. And so he asked this guy, what is the interest? What is the interest? Suddenly he's saying, 7%, Swamiji. 7%. Your interest is 7%. Even Swamiji didn't know what to say. Never heard an answer like that. That fellow thought he's asking what is the interest rate in America, bank interest. So you will hear he's a finance guy, so he hears that one. What is Swamiji asking? What is interest? What is 7%? Then all his friends are asking him, where you get 7%? Tell us also. Crazy fellows. Why are we talking about that? No interest. So that's why I'm saying don't use this word interest. God knows how you interpret it. Anxiety. Why do you have that anxiety? It is because you are dependent. What is done, what is not done. Why they called me, why they didn't call me. Why is the mood bad, why is the mood good. What is the interest rate, what is the interest rate. What is this, what is the... All that is there because you're dependent. So imagine if you've achieved a state, friends, where you're independent. So you will live life on your terms. Now you're dependent. Dependent upon what your friends think of you, what society does. So everybody is a slave of something. Spoken to billionaires who are miserable because their children don't talk to them. One child doesn't talk to him, his whole life is... all that money, all that power means nothing to him. So it doesn't matter what you have. It's where you are dependent that it gets you. All of you have that problem. You ask yourself, where is it? What gets me? Where I'm dependent. The minute I'll become independent, what will my life be? You'll be the king of kings. As Ramatirtha says, you'll be Caesar's Caesar. Because he achieved that stage. So there's stories after stories in the Puranas of this total self-sufficiency. So one of the sages, he had elephantitis. You know elephantitis? Horrible disease. It's like a virus. It gets you when you're young. So what happens is one of your feet, usually the feet, it could be arm, but usually it's the foot, it becomes massive, like a tree trunk, literally. And the other foot is normal. So it looks horrible when you look at it. Very sad. So one of the sages had that, great sage. So the gods came to him for a boon, thinking he'll ask to alleviate that because he's done so much karma, so much good. It's all symbolic. Nobody will come. They're trying to portray. These are stories given in the Puranas, to inspire people. And he says, can I give you a boon? He says, no, I don't need anything. No, you must need something. He can't tell him what, but he says, you must need something. No, I don't need anything. Thank you so much for coming. That is good for me. That is the boon. Went on and okay, he says, I cannot leave until you tell me something. So you know what he asked? Oh, okay. You can transfer my disease from my right to left. If you want to give me something for your sake, I'll take. So now you will say, how stupid. At least you should. What are they trying to portray? Genuinely, you don't feel anything. Imagine somebody offers you $1 million and genuinely you will say, what do you want me to do? Why don't you keep it, You do it give it to somebody who needs it. Like that. What a state you've reached, right? At least theoretically you should be inspired. Practically, I know you'll say, take it and then I'll see later about becoming self-sufficient. But theoretically, at least you should be inspired. When a person inside doesn't need, even if they'll take, it will be to help others. But they won't need. Not depend on any being for any object. What a state. Yeah, Shreyas.
Hariom Gautamji. Verse 18 is very impactful when you read, just listening to the translation and listening to all these discussions. No interest, no dependence. But we are all social creatures. A lot of us are heavily bhogis. We're not even close to being yogis. Forget jnani and sannyasi. Isn't it obvious for some of us to then say, hey, if we really need to intellectually evolve, we have to go slow first before we go, not fast, but before we're able to.
Shreyas,
Yeah.
you're going so slow already. If you go any slower, you'll go backwards, man. You understand? The way you're talking is as if you've come to me and you've said, look, I want to leave everything. I want to go to the academy for 3 years. Wife, children, forget about it. Are you in that? Then I would say go slow. You're already so slow. Trust me, if you do any more slow, literally you will be going backwards. All of you. Nothing to do with you personally. So put in the maximum effort you can. You're not left anything. Don't worry. You have your job. You have your family around you. All I'm saying is stop bugging them. That is the detachment you should practice. All of you. I'm not saying leave your family. Stop chewing their heads. That is detachment. Trust me. The day your wife sits and joins you for the lecture saying you've changed, then I'll tell you, go slow. Let that day come first.
Okay.
So do your study, serve as much as you can, keep gaining the knowledge, and that's it. So I would say put in the maximum effort because you're already going too slow. No jokes.
Okay.
If you are impulsively coming and telling me, like I said, people have come, I want to leave everything, then I would say, look, you're not ready for leaving everything and going. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, do the best you can. That's the slowest you can do. Trust me. Beyond that, you will not grow at all.
Mhm.
So don't get victimized by these concepts. It's your mind not wanting to give up anything which it is attached to. Right?
Yes. Yes.
So nobody is saying give up your social life. You're saying social creatures. And don't say we. Don't put me in your category. We are all social creatures. Say, I am a... So we are all creatures. I am a human being. I'm not a creature. And I'm saying every day you don't have to be a social creature. 2 days a week is okay. That's all. So practice self-control wherever you can. Now, how much slower you want to go?
Thank you.
Chitra, I apologize in advance for any examples I gave, which you didn't understand. So don't ask about any examples I gave. You ask the concept. That example you gave, I go, but this is yes, go ahead.
No, this is about the concept. You said
Concept.
not
You're moving in. You're moving fast now.
not depend on any being for any object, right? So at what stage is this relevant? Because when you see people going, dressed as sannyasis and taking dikshas, and we saw that in Kumbh Mela also, like they are totally dependent even on their material needs or from others, right? Food, water. So could you explain that piece in how this line reads?
See, first of all, how it's practiced today and what the concept is completely different. So let's not talk about what you're seeing today. Okay? Who is Shankara says you could have this disguise Udara Nimittam Bahukrita Vesha in Shankara's time, which is 1300 years ago. He says most of these people are putting this disguise for the sake of the belly. They want to make a living out of it. Right? So a truly detached person serves. And out of that service, whatever comes, like I have already explained, they accept. Doesn't come, they are not dependent. They die. Doesn't matter. That is the level of a sannyasi. Where is that? What are you talking about? What is going on today? I don't want to get into that at all. So you understand the concept. First of all, it's a mental state. It's not just showing what you're wearing and all that. Inside, full of desires, it could be. I was reading about a person who, whatever the company earned, he distributed it to all his employees. I would say he's a sannyasi. You understand? No interest for oneself. He has the power not to do for his employees. He's using it to do for others. You fellows deserve it, not me. So many cases like that. Fellow gave a car to each guy, a flat. That I would say that person is a yogi, a sannyasi. What is the definition? You read in chapter 6, we'll get there. Anashrita karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha sa sannyasi sa yogi cha na niragnir na chakriya. Chapter 6 verse 1, one of the central verses of the Gita. He who does what he ought to do without depending on that fruit of action, without anything for oneself, he is a yogi or a sannyasi, not anybody else. So what are we talking? So just because you're wearing clothes and have an outward appearance, it is an inward state of growth. In fact, Ramatirtha, he said that at the end of his life, he died at 33. He was a sannyasi. He said, I'm giving up this ochre rope because it's no longer a symbol of freedom. It's become a symbol of slavery. They're dependent on the world and they want to make use of the world. So last few years he wore a normal clothes like others. In fact, my guru didn't wear the ochre robe. He took up this thing just to show it's different. What we're doing is completely different from the mainstream. Because the whole meaning has been lost. For which he had to pay a very heavy price in the beginning. People won't accept it. You have a family and all, and you want to be called a spiritual. So now he's changed the whole definition, at least amongst the intellectuals. Now they understand. So in the 19th verse, he gives the final conclusion. Yes, Shri. Yeah, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yes, Gautamji. I had a question here. So, like this verse 18, they say like they have no interest whatever what is done or what is not done, right?
Right.
But isn't Krishna's not obligatory action, but initial goal was to basically avoid the war? I mean, it happened, and then we had the Gita. So is all that basically outcome of pursuing selfless action? Like it was not a goal; it had to be done. So
yes,
but they're
it
not.
had to be done. What he's saying here is whether there was a war or whether there was peace, he would have been the same in both. See, try and understand the spirit of it. So you do what you ought to do, but you're not dependent upon an outcome. There should be peace, there should be peace. If there has to be war, so be it. Now go all out and fight. So there's no dependence on either outcome. There is just what ought to be done. That's what it means.
Okay, thank you.
19.
तस्मादसक्तः सततं कार्यं कर्म समाचर असक्तो ह्याचरन् कर्म परमाप्नोति पुरुषः.
Therefore, without attachment, always perform actions which should be done, ought to be done. Karyam karma samachara. For by performing action without attachment, man reaches paramapnoti, attains the supreme. This is the conclusion. So, verses 4 to 19, this is the 19th verse. So, the last 16 verses have been talking about the intellectual reasons why you need to act. And here he concludes. So, if you work selfishly, you will go on increasing desires and your mind will get more and more disturbed out. If you are tamasic and don't work, the desires will remain brewing within. You'll be frustrated, repressed, agitated. Both ways you won't achieve anything in this world. Therefore, he says, without attachment means without that selfishness. Always do what ought to be done. So I explained earlier, you set a higher purpose. That's point 1. Point 2, you fix your program, your life in a way that helps you achieve that purpose. And performing those actions become your obligations. Nothing else. So your intellect pitches up a higher purpose and fixes a plan and program to achieve that purpose. So when it's a higher purpose, there's no attachment, there's no selfishness. And what you do to achieve that becomes your karyam karma, what ought to be done in life. And if you do that without attachment, again he's saying without attachment. That is the biggest problem. These desires, attachments, self-centeredness. You will reach the Supreme. Period. So after giving beautifully the logic and reason, explaining the incredible principle of yajna, sacrifice, which only a human being can conceive and execute, he gives the final conclusion here. You want to reach the ultimate state of enlightenment, this is the way to do it. So Vedanta gives you that practical, incredible technique of how to live in this world. So you don't have to leave anything, Shreyas, and don't go slow also. This is the way to do it. Keep doing it. It's the best you can do. Yes, Vikram?
Gautamji, there is a question from Tim.
Okay.
Is selfless action without attachment the same as sacrifice?
Yes, it's the same thing. See, the concept, it's very interesting why they don't say only service. They always put in service and sacrifice. Now why? Because even if you do service, there can be, in fact most times there is ego and selfishness coming in somewhere and polluting it. So a person who does service to others, let's say he builds a hospital, but then he puts a condition, put my family's name there. Whole America is that. I went to college here. I'm nothing against it. I believe it's a far more charitable country than other countries. I admire that part of the life here. But why do you pollute it with desires? So I went to college here, as I've told you, when I was an undergrad, and every bench, every lawn also. First of all, grass is not yours. This green, that yard, that is also named after somebody. Even the room, and on top there's a placard in memory of. You feel like you're going into a graveyard whenever you go into any place. In memory of. Why? You want my name there. So it's polluted. It's service, but it's not sacrifice. So two conditions have to be met. It should be a higher purpose, which could be service to others. If it's not enlightenment, most people can't conceive it, but everybody can conceive serving others. So it is selfless. But you should make sure there is no ego or egocentric desire. That is the sacrifice. You're giving up your selfishness. Even if you say, I like to serve, I'm doing it because it makes me happy, it's polluted. You're not doing it because it ought to be done. You're doing it because you like to do it. Just as another person likes to eat something. What is the difference? Philosophically, there's no difference. Or you could do it because internally you get a egoistic kick out of it. It's very subtle, but it's still selfish. I am serving. I am so much better off than other people. I have served them. You feel appeased. It's like appeasing your guilt conscience. I'm living in luxury, others are suffering. I give them, you feel good. Selfish. Because you're doing it to feel good, not doing it because it ought to be done. So to be selfless, very difficult. To be unselfish is very easy. You understand? Okay, couple of questions quickly. Deepika?
What ought to be done often can bring pleasure, and so you do enjoy it, and there's nothing
Yeah,
wrong
but you're
with
not doing it because you enjoy it. That's the difference. You're doing it because it ought to be done. In other words, even if it didn't give pleasure, you would do it. As long as that condition is met. Serving your mother-in-law gives you a lot of displeasure. But you think, no, it ought to be done. And then another action, you do it because of it ought to be done, but it gives you pleasure. But I would say both are selfless because you're doing it because it ought to be done. And incidentally, once you get used to it, it is the greatest pleasure.
Yeah.
But still, you're not doing it for that. It's incidental. It's not the reason for the action. That's why I'm saying it's very subtle. In fact, he'll say sooner, later on in the text, to really understand action is very difficult. Kim karma, kim akarmeti, kavayopyatra mohita. Even the kavis, even the wise are deluded. What is action? What is inaction? It's not easy. So you got to go deep into the reason why you're doing something. Is it because you're getting a pleasure, or is it purely this ought to be done? It's being done, regardless of how I feel. It could be a lot of displeasure. Get up in the middle of the night, take your neighbor to a hospital. It's not pleasurable. You've had a long day at work and you want to sleep. But if you believe it ought to be done, you do it. Finish. So rest of the questions we can take up for the Q&A. You can email them in. Otherwise, we'll take them up next week, right? So see you on Wednesday. Otherwise, the following weekend. Hari Om.